So what do you say we spend a little time in the garden today? All right, all right, all right. I tell you what, it's getting hot.
So hot in here.
It's about 82 degrees out here today, and I believe it's time to plant some squash and some cucumbers. If you saw our last video we did out here amongst our garden plots, we talked about our spring planting schedule and kind of the order in which we want to get things in the ground. And the first thing on that list is direct seeding squash and cucumbers. Now we're not quite to the middle of March here in South Georgia in Zone 8B, but I've looked at the weather forecast for the next 2 weeks and I feel pretty good about going ahead and getting these in the ground. I don't know that I've ever planted squash and cucumbers this early. Usually maybe it's, you know, more towards the end of March, but I feel pretty good about the forecast. And you know, squash and cucumbers are pretty easy to plant. If we do get a rogue frost or something in late March, early April, really not hard to go back and replant them. So I'm willing to take that chance to get things in the ground and get some early production going on here. So today we're going to be working in this big plot, my biggest plot here on the back half of our property. And we're going to be working on the very end of it over there. Before we get over there, I'm going to show you our cabbage and stuff we transplanted in a video about a couple weeks ago. And man, I shot some juice to it through our drip irrigation there, which is buried below those plants, and these things have popped and greened up, and man, they're growing fast. Probably need to turn that drip on, which we'll do here in a minute when we plant the squash. Give them a little bit of water. With these Chinese cabbage, I always have a little more pressure on these guys, so I'm gonna have to come in here with some takedown garden spray and take care of those guys later this evening. But man, they are looking good and growing fast since I gave them a little fertilizer. Here's our superstar cabbage, and it has overcame its transplant shock and starting to pop as well. So those things are growing nice and fast, and they should come off pretty quick here. And then the next, I'd say, you know, a few months or so. When we transplanted these brassicas here, we had a lot of people asking, do we have issues with rabbits coming and chewing up these newly transplanted broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage transplants? And yes, we do. Those woods right there, which are not mine, it's not a real big stretch of pine trees, but it does hold some rabbits. So every now and then when I come out here at night to feed the cats, I'll do me a little rabbit walk around, and sometimes that right there happens. Bye-bye, Mr. Rabbit. So we had our drip system installed for those 4 rows there of cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, and kohlrabi, but it kind of ended about right here. So what I did was I just used a coupling, tied in some more main line there to run all the way to the end of this plot here. So this space in the middle here is going to be getting a couple rows of okra and some field peas. Probably won't worry with those till the beginning of April. But down here on the end is where we're going to be putting a row of cucumbers and a row of squash. And I've already installed my drip tape row start to kind of let me know where my rows are going to be. So I got one right there and one right there. So we'll do a row of cucumbers right here. I skipped over about 6 or 7 feet and place that other row right there. So instead of putting a stake out here, I just use those row starts as a marker where we're gonna put our furrows and bury our drip tape and do our planting. And then as far as our soil goes, we had a big lush cool season cover crop out here just, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we got that incorporated into the soil nicely. There's still a good bit of debris out there, but I don't think it's going to hinder our planting by any means. To be honest with you, it kind of feels weird just to be planting 1 row of summer squash and 1 row of cucumbers. Usually, the last 3, 4, 5 years I can remember, I would plant a whole plot of summer squash and then I would bookend it each with a row of cucumbers. I'd usually use one of those 30 by 35 plots in my dream garden there and just fill it up with rows of summer squash and then cucumbers on the end. Then we were growing stuff to sell, but I hung up my market farmer boots fall last year, and so now we're just growing for ourselves and have a little extra to give away. So I don't need near as much squash or cucumbers. I do like to at least grow 1 row because I like to grow you know, decent variety of things, not just planting one variety of yellow squash. As you'll see in a little bit, we like to plant a lot of different shapes and sizes and colors of squash. So it does feel weird just planting one row of squash, but we'll be fine, and that will be plenty for us. When we were growing whole plots of squash, you know, I needed that production because we were selling the stuff, and I was going out there and picking a 5-gallon bucket full of squash and cucumbers about every other day. Well, that's a lot for just a family of 4 to eat, and more than you can usually give away. So one row will be enough today. Now, as far as planting summer squash and cucumbers, that's one of the things we like to succession plant around here, which means we'll plant it 3, sometimes 4, but probably 3 times from spring now on through when it just gets way too hot in summer, probably, you know, into July or so. So what we do is when we plant our squash, we'll start harvesting when it starts, you know, producing in 30, 40 days or so. And then we'll enjoy that row of squash. But at some point, squash, they kind of succumb to disease and insect pressure, and those squash plants just end up being just harboring all these pests and diseases, and we'll get them out of here. We don't like to hold on to them, you know, once they start seeing a lot of squash bugs or powdery mildew, downy mildew, things like that. So we'll get them out of here, and then we'll find another open spot and plant us another row, and then a month or so later we'll plant us another row. So we split them up about a month apart. You can do it closer than that, but we'll do 3 different plantings. That way we're not just trying to hold on to some diseased, insect infected plants here. We can have some fresh plants coming along, and it really helps with our disease pressure around here. Get those guys out of here when they get looking a little sickly like that. So I've got my 2 rows marked off where they're going to be right behind me here. Let me grab my wheel hose, let's bury some drip tape, and then it'll be time to plant. It's getting hot out here, so we gonna plant some squash. I am getting so hot, I wanna plant some squash. All right, drip lines are installed, buried, hooked up, crimped at the end, turned on, and you can see there those lines are inflated. Just letting that water run through there, waiting on those water spots to show up. That's gonna tell us where to plant. So while we're waiting for those water spots to appear to tell us where to put our seeds, let's go over the varieties we're planting here. We have so many good options on our website, so many different sizes, shapes, colors of squash. You really can't go wrong with any of them. And I always like to plant something a little different every year just to kind of mix it up. There are a couple of varieties that I usually just try to grow every single year. One of them being Gold Prize. That's probably our most popular summer squash variety. I don't really care for the old-timey kind of bumpy crookneck squash, but a lot of people do like them. We sell quite a bit of those. I like the Gold Prize. I like the smoother semi-crookneck squash. I don't like the real, you know, sure enough bent over crookneck squash, but just kind of the semi-crookneck or the straight neck. I like those a lot. So I've grown the Gold Prize year after year, and it's always a good one for me. I'm not growing that one this year because I want to try something a little different. This one here is one I've never grown before. This is a new one we just added called grenade squash. So this is similar to the round zucchinis we carry. We have the 1 ball, the 8 ball, and the cue ball, which is a pale green, a dark green, and a yellow round zucchini, and those are awesome. I usually grow some of those, but instead of those I'm gonna grow these little egg-shaped ones here, these grilling squash. So the yellow one's called grenade. We also have a green one called green griller, and really excited about trying those. So that one's going in here. And then as far as kind of more standard squash, instead of Gold Prize, I'm going with this variety here called Delta. We just added that one this year, and I want to give it a try. It's got some disease resistance on it, so I'm going to go for that. Nice little smooth yellow squash there. My wife loves the green zucchini, so I always got to grow some of those. We have a yellow variety called Golden Delight, which is really good, but I'm growing this Spineless Beauty here, which I've grown. Seems like I grow it every year. I really like this one. And then I always grow at least one patty pan squash, the flattened, some people call them scallop squash. Sunburst is usually the one I grow, but I'm trying a little different with the color this year. So I'm growing this partial eclipse. We have another one called Moonbeam, which is a white one. The Sunburst is a great one, but I like the coloration on this one. So we're going with a partial eclipse. So I've got 4 different varieties. I've got about 40 row feet. So I'm gonna just plant 10 row feet of each, and then we'll have a nice little variety of summer squash come harvest time. So we can kind of start to see where these emitters are here. The soil will kind of darken as it moistens here. And if we feel around there, yeah, so I can feel the tape there. I can see a little puddle of water right there. So those emitters are every foot along this tape. And once that tape runs a little bit, we can see where they are. That's where we want to put our seeds. Now, a little lesson I've learned over the years, I used to just put my seed right here in the kind of this little puddle. But what seems to happen over time, as the soil kind of compacts on top of it, is, I don't know, I guess the seed maybe gets a little too deep and I don't get as good a germination. So what I like to do, let me get the seed packet open right here, is I actually like to put the seed right beside the emitter. So we've got these 2 little mini furrows here from our drip tape layer attachment burying that drip tape. And so I'll put it on either side. We'll just go on this side right here for the time being. And shoot, in just about 30-45 minutes or so, this whole area right here will be nice and wet, so we don't have to, you know, worry about just putting it right there. We'll get some nice water coverage here from that emitter. So I like putting them alongside that emitter. I just seem to get better germination that way. The seeds don't get too deep. And since I've got a packet of seeds per, 10 feet, I'm going to just put 2 there beside each emitter, and we can come back and thin these out later. That'll make sure we get a good stand, and then we'll just kind of cover them up, pack them in good right there, and they'll get plenty of water being right there. And once they form roots, they can feed off that water and fertilizer we inject through there really, really easily. All right, so the squash seeds are tucked in there all along that 40-foot row or so there. And what I'll do is I'll just let this drip here run for, I don't know, it might take a couple hours. It's hard to tell, it can vary depending on how dry your soil is or how fluffy it is, how long it takes the drip tape to kind of saturate that seed bed there. But I'll just keep an eye on it. You can tell where the soil is wet and where it isn't, because it'll be a lot darker like you see there. So once we see that kind of over this whole seed bed, then I'll turn it off, and usually that's close to enough to get everything germinated. We'll get some rain in the next few days, and that should help it out a little bit too. So I'll just keep an eye on this and turn the water off when that seed bed is completely moist there, so we get some good germination. And I won't leave these planted at every emitter. I'll usually thin them out to 1 plant every 2 feet. Some people will plant them farther apart than that, but I like to give mine room to grow laterally this way or this way. They'll kind of stretch out. That's why I gave myself about 7 feet here between where those cucumbers are about to go and where the squash is. Give myself plenty of room. I'll plant them thick along the row and just let them stretch out in either direction there. So now it's time for the cucumbers. And just like the squash, lots of great options with the cucumbers as well, just depending on what you like. You got pickling cucumbers, you got slicing cucumbers, you got kind of the extra long Armenian cucumbers, you got the little tiny gherkin cucumbers. So lots of options there. I always plant a pickling variety and a slicer variety. And then as far as picking the variety of pickling or slicing cucumber that you like, lots of good options there as well. You got some heirloom varieties, some open pollinated varieties, of course. You got some hybrids. We have some that are parthenocarpic, which means they don't require any pollination. So if you don't have a lot of bees around your area and you struggle with getting pollinators in there, those parthenocarpic ones are a great option for you. Then we have the gynoecious cucumbers, which is the ones I like to plant. So gynoecious is just a fancy word that means all female flowers. So these varieties produce all female flowers. The female flowers where the fruit comes from. If you got more female flowers, you got more fruits, you got bigger harvest within a given space. We've got lots of good gynoecious options as far as slicers go. Stonewall's a really good one. Diomede's a really good one. Olympus is a really good one. I've grown all three of those. Those are all good. This year I'm growing Bristol, which is one we added. It's got some really, really good disease resistance on it. So nice, uniform, straight slicing cucumber there. So about these gynoecious cucumbers here. In these packs here, 12% of the seeds are what we call a pollinator variety. So this is just a standard open pollinated slicing cucumber variety that's included here. All the seeds look the same, so you don't really know which one is the pollinator. But you got to have that pollinator because that's what produces the male flowers. You got to have the pollen to pollinate these female flowers that you're getting from this gynoecious variety. So as a result, you can't just really plant one or two of these seeds. If you figure there's 50 seeds per pack and you know 12% of them are the pollinator, you know, I'd recommend at least planting 10 to 20 of these seeds. So you need, you know, a decent size, I don't say decent size, but at least about a 15-foot row or so to make sure you get that pollinator in there. Because if you don't get that pollinator in there, you're just making a bunch of female flowers. There's no pollen to pollinate it. Now another option you can do if you've got some open pollinated slicing cucumber seeds laying around, like a market more or something like that, and you know what those are, you can go plant those in amongst this and put your own pollinator in there. But with these, make sure you plant, you know, 10, 20 seeds or so you make sure you get those male flowers. So Bristol's the slicer we're going with. As far as the pickling cucumber, Max Pack is one I grew last year. Really, really liked it, but I'm always up for something new, and we're going with Expedition this year for our pickler. And then I'm adding something new to the mix that I don't normally grow. We had a lot of people asking us to add a tiny little gherkin type cucumber, and we found this one right here, which is an AAS winner, All America selection, so you know it's a good one. This Parisian gherkin here. So I'm going to split these three up. I like to grow my cucumbers on a trellis. We're not going to put that up today, but we will once they get going. So I'm just going to split this 40-foot row in thirds. 1/3 slicer, excuse me, 1/3 slicer, 1/3 pickler, and 1/3 of the gherkin. Now with the cucumbers here, since I'm growing these vertically on a trellis, I'm going to plant them closer than these drip emitters are. So these drip emitters, as I mentioned, are every foot. But we're growing these cucumbers vertically, and I can put the plants closer than that. So I'm not really going to pay attention to where these emitters are. And I like to space my cucumbers when I'm growing them like this on a trellis, anywhere from 4 to 6 inches apart. So I'll plant these seeds pretty thick along this row here, and then I'll thin them out later if I need to. So we'll put them every, I don't know, 4 inches or so along here, because we're growing them vertically, so we don't have to have a lot of lateral space. And these drip emitters, just like with the squash, they'll put out plenty enough water to cover these gaps here, and even these seeds that are sitting between the emitters will get plenty of water and will germinate in the same time that these that are a little closer to the emitters will. So nothing to worry about there. So we'll just scatter them along this row here about 4 inches apart, making sure we try to get 1/3 of each variety planted. All right. So we got our first warm season planting in the ground. I don't really consider potatoes a warm season crop, although we plant those in late winter, early spring too. Well, squash in my mind is the first warm season crop that we've gotten in the ground. That will be shortly followed by beans, and then putting our tomato and pepper transplants in the ground. Not sure which one of those will come first, but those are the next things up on the list. As far as the squash and cucumbers go, we always like to plant those together in the same general plot or area. It just helps with our long-term garden rotation. They tend to have the same pests and diseases that plague those two crops, and so planting them in the same spot helps us rotate things around so our disease and insect issues aren't compounding year over year. And while the drip irrigation doesn't really help with insect pressure, it helps tremendously with disease pressure. Squash, just like tomatoes, if you get a lot of leaf moisture on them, you're going to start having some problems. So that subsurface drip that's feeding the plant at the roots, not having to water overhead and continually wet those leaves, that goes a long ways to helping keep those squash plants healthy for longer. So if you can grow them on drip tape, I'd highly recommend it, as opposed to giving them a lot of overhead water. Obviously you can't help rainfall, but just try to minimize the leaf moisture on the squash and they'll stay healthier a lot longer, especially if you live in somewhere that's hot and humid like we do. And if you've never tried one of those gynoecious cucumber varieties, I would highly recommend giving them a try at least 1 year. It will absolutely amaze you how many cucumbers they will produce. In the past, I've grown them about a 30-foot row at the time, and literally you're picking almost a 5-gallon bucket every other day. It's just, production is just out of this world. Whether it's a gynoecious slicer like the Bristol we planted, or a gynoecious pickling variety like the Expedition we planted, man, those varieties that make all female flowers, it's just amazing. It's hard to explain it until you actually grow it and experience it. So in the comments below, let me know what varieties of summer squash and cucumbers you'll be planting, or maybe you've already planted. Tell me which kind you like. Do you like the old school varieties, the old bumpy squash, or you like some of the modern smoother squashes? Maybe you like the patty pans. Tell me which ones are your favorites. I'll put some links below to all the varieties we planted today, so you can head on over to our website and check those out. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and ring that bell so you get notified every time we come out with a new video. And if you did enjoy this one, make sure to check out these other 2 squash and cucumber videos right here. I think you'll really enjoy those as well. We'll see you next time.